Okay, so Unbox Therapy released a video about a week ago on the Gigabyte AERO 15 OLED and the AERO 17 HDR, which falls under the Gigabyte's creator lineup. Now, it was a sponsored video, so I'm just going to make certain things clear about this. No matter how glossy or cool it sounds, 4K laptops aren't the smartest of choices, which is now made even harder thanks to the newer QHD variants that have popped up thanks to the RTX 3000 series GPUs. However, there are a few exceptions, most of which have the created tag on them. So along with a bit more clarity over the Gigabyte Aeros, this video will also give you the few exceptions of 4K laptops, which you should otherwise never consider. Unfortunately, I can only do this with the specs for now, but if you don't forget to subscribe, it will improve my chances to bring you guys some benchmarks and hands-on reviews to back the claims I make, instead of relying on other sources for images and footages as well. So hit that big red button before continuing. Okay, we will start with the studio branding on the GeForce RTX sticker next to the Intel sticker on the Aero laptops. Nvidia Studio is basically the new category of drivers that Nvidia creates to improve but importantly streamline the GPU's involvement, also known as hardware acceleration, in a more professional and creative environments and applications. These include Adobe, DaVinci, Blender, Streamlabs, Unreal Engine, Autodesk, etc. etc. Their website shows what exactly a GPU does in each of these applications and more when using the studio drivers. Links in the description for that, so you can check that out. Now you can download the studio drivers and switch between the Nvidia's Game Ready driver and the studio driver in the GeForce Experience control panel, as long as you have the minimum system requirements. So no need to worry about the studio badging and all, obviously. However, this studio badging next to the RTX GeForce sticker is actually essential, unlike what others say on forums and stuff, as the Nvidia Studio and the studio driver is mostly developed from expertise gained through Nvidia's Quadro GPUs, which are mainly for professional environments. Sorry for the run-on sentence there, that might have been a bit too long, sorry about that. Anyways, thus the RTX GPUs that are optimized to run on the Game Ready drivers will have to adapt when running the studio drivers. Well, not exactly, as it's not that hard. As I mentioned before, you can switch between them easily. However, there are a whole host of things Nvidia Studio can do that not all laptops can, even if they meet the requirements for the studio drivers. These requirements are quite broad. Some of them are probably listed on this image, but there's a much larger requirement for this, which is why the last sentence is probably a bit vague. Anyways, thus Nvidia tests and validates laptops that can use the studio drivers to their max potential and gives these laptops the studio sticker, with the Gigabyte Aeros being one of those laptops. Now this is also what makes them one of the few exceptions for a 4K display in a laptop. Here's why. If you're getting a laptop with 4K, it's most likely because you have a specific creative or professional workload that requires it. Like for example, editing studio grade photos and videos where color gradings, resolutions, and realism of the picture matters, whether upscaling to a higher resolution for billboards or movie theaters, or downscaling to a lower resolution for YouTube. Nvidia Studio drivers ensure the Adobe or DaVinci or Streamlabs or whatever app you're using to GPU accelerate the downscaling or upscaling of any video or photos effectively, while the 4K display will help to ensure the resolution of the product is, well, good to look at. Remember, there is a saying that what looks good on a 1080p won't look good on a 4K, but what looks good on a 4K will look better on a 1080p, thanks to the concept of pixel density. Anyway, if this is your cup of morning tea, then the Gigabyte AERO is one of the best options out there. What helps the Gigabyte AERO's case is their screens, which are HDR 400 certified with a 500 nits peak brightness. The 15-incher goes a step up with an AMOLED display that gives even more vibrance with the colors. Although I wouldn't fuss too much over that, that's not the big issue. I'll come to that issue later. Anyway, also with a long 99 watt-hour battery and 2 kg weight, 2.5 kg for the 17-inch, portability is probably the best in class. The top spec i9s cost $3,499 US for the 15-inch and $3,699 for the 17-inch. I obviously can't get pricing for any of the other countries. It's next to impossible. I mean, I tried finding it on pounds, but it was way too hard. As I mentioned, these costs for the top spec i9 versions, but storage and memory specs do vary as well, as the fact that you can get the Aero with the 8GB RTX 3080 or the 16GB RTX 3080. So prices can vary depending upon specs. This varying specs does make comparison hard, The closest that you can get to for the gigabytes are the newly updated Razer Blade 15 Advanced, which is an OLED, and the 17, which is an IPS LCD, both of which are Nvidia Studio certified as well, except for the full HD versions. There is no HDR here, but you get a touchscreen, and the 17-incher has a 120Hz 4K display instead of the 60Hz. The Razer also gets you a higher GPU wattage and boost clock, but a smaller battery and a heavier chassis, as well as the less beefier i9 11900H instead of the i9 11980HK, which is the max that you can get in the i9 versions. Now, both these laptops have nothing in comparison to the mini LED HDR 1000 certified 4K display on the MSI Creator 17, at least spec-wise though. It's about $100 more than the max spec 17-inch from the Gigabyte, but you get more storage for that. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail on this as I really want to test it out first, so boost that sub count by subscribing so that I can knock on MSI's door for a test piece. The reason I want to do this is because, there are some issues with the mini LED compared to the AMOLED and the LCD, and I really want to test it before I come to a conclusion on this. Anyways, dropped the price of the Gigabyte, speccing it with the i7 and the RTX 3070, and it's now at wars with the QHD offerings, which you never had before. Only the Razer's QHD gets the studio validation, but there are more on the way, making it hard to look at the 4K options from the Gigabyte, unless you really need a resolution over the frame rates. With all this said, the Gigabyte AERO 15 OLED and the 17 HDR clearly puts themselves in a very specific niche. But that's not the only takeaway from this video. Don't get a 4K display, go for the QHD, but if you need it regardless, make sure it's on a laptop with the studio badging at the very least. This is one of the exceptions to going for a 4K display on a laptop. I will talk about other exceptions later, touchscreen being one of them, and I'll compile them into one video in the future. But for now, if this helped, hit the bell icon and subscribe, and I will be back.